Welcome back to the ITV Sport YouTube channel. Paris-Nice starts on Sunday. You can see highlights of every single stage on IT4 every night. 6 p.m. on Sunday night and 7 p.m. for the other nights. I don't know why. I think you do something funny with the clocks over there in the UK. But today we're going to look at Stage 2 from the 2020 edition from Chevreuse to Chalette-sur-Loing, an absolute banger of a stage. You're looking at the profile here and you're thinking, that doesn't look too scary to me. Should just be a bunch sprint, right? Well, you're wrong. At 30 k's to go, or about 34 k's to go, the race absolutely exploded because they turned left at this point here and went into this open farmland section where there was heavy crosswinds, and Bora-Hansgrohe and Trek Segafredo decided to split it up. With 78 k's to go, there was a breakaway of two riders, Yvert and Manuel Diaz. They had a gap of 1 minute and 25 on the peloton, but Bora-Hansgrohe started to chase them down, first with Jempe Drucker on the front here for Max Schachmann. He's on the left-hand side with his yellow jersey poking out underneath his jacket. Igita up there on GC is on the right-hand side with the yellow helmet. Schachmann's leading the general classification. He won Stage 1 and he's scheming with Peter Sagan right now because there's the intermediate sprint seconds, bonus seconds available in about a kilometre from this point. And the sprint was actually at the end of an uphill drag that would suit riders like Schachmann and Igita. You can see Bora-Hansgrohe on these narrow roads are fanned out, four abreast like Joe does with his mates at Regent's Park on a Sunday morning, and that makes it very difficult for other teams with other GC contenders to move up. It's too late to move up positions, especially when Drucker begins to accelerate with Sagan on his wheel, who's then going to lead out Schachmann to try and get these 3 bonus seconds. Sagan was absolutely selfless in this Stage 2 that I believe he could have won. He had fantastic legs. He's looking back to see where Schachmann was. He was pretty much dropping Schachmann and Igita off the wheel up this climb to the intermediate sprint point, and then looks back to Schachmann here as if to say, come on, you better take these after all the work I've done. The race did then settle down for about 15 to 17 kilometers after Schachmann won that intermediate sprint, but Bora-Hansgrohe, Trek Segafredo and FDJ made sure they stayed in pretty good position because they were about to go through a small village in about a K and then turn left into a potential crosswind section. You can see with them fanned out across the road, it's impossible to move up. So if you're not at the front already, then it will be too late by the time Bora or FDJ start to put the herd on through this village. Stefan Kung moving up on the left-hand side here, and he's going to lead them through education first, paranoid about Sergio Higuita's positioning, looking back to make sure he's in the front group of 10 riders, because after Kung turns left here, there's supposed to be really strong crosswinds. Stefan Kung obviously came third at Harrogate in the World Championships 2019 road race, loves terrible weather and a bit of crosswind. And you can see EF talking to Bora-Hansgrohe saying, are we going to split it? Are you going to split it? And Bora immediately start to get to work. It's not so strong, the wind at this moment, but already riders were getting put under pressure at the back. Igita was at the front. Really impressive from Igita in this Stage 2 of Paris-Nice. And you can see how exposed this farmland section is. Soren Kragh Andersen flicks Michael Matthews through. Thibaut Pinot on Matthews' wheel. They're not using up the whole road because they're trying to create a split. They're not trying to make it easy for the others behind them. Nibali, I think, is moving up on the left. And Alaphilippe had a mechanical at the worst time. Just when the pace was getting put on by Trek and Bora-Hansgrohe and FDJ, he gets a rear wheel flat, I think, and even with Tim de Klerk waiting up to bring him back, there's no way he was going to make it back to that first group. Vincenzo Nibali uses this lull through this small village when there's less wind affecting them to move up on the inside to try and get into good position because he knows that I think it might be Alex Kirsch, his Trek Segafredo teammate, is going to kick really hard with FDJ and Kung again. And it doesn't look like the pace is that fierce, but then when you look behind, you can get tells for how hard it is to move up. You see this Ajoudouar rider trying to move up on the outside, sprinting as hard as he can because he's worried there's going to be another split. Sam Bennett is at the back of this group, and no matter how good his legs were, and I think he might have had a crash the day before, if you're that far back and it's starting to be strung out single file in the crosswinds, eventually someone in front of you is going to lose the wheel, and that will pretty much be your race over. And he now is in echelon number 2. Nairo Quintana, who'd done pretty much everything right to stay in echelon number 1, crashes, and then he has to change bike at his brother's bike, Dia Quintana. And just that little bit of bad luck, suffering a crash at that moment, meant his Paris-Nice GC ambitions were already over, just like Julien Alaphilippe's, because now Trek with Vincenzo Nibali, I think 25 seconds behind Schachmann, but on the same time as Quintana, he puts Pedersen and Kirsch on the front to drill it, to extend that gap to Alaphilippe and Nairo Quintana, who are obviously GC threats for Vincenzo Nibali. They're already 46 seconds behind at this point. There was 17 k's to go. You see FDJ trying to move Pinot up on the right-hand side again. They're worried with Pedersen driving it really hard that he was in bad position, particularly if Bora-Hansgrohe, when they turn again, again start to put down the pace, I think with about 13 or 12 kilometers to go. And you can see here with the flags on the left-hand side of the road as we look at it, there's a crosswind going from the rider's right to left. But eventually Trek and Mads Pedersen were interested in splitting it once again. I think they were trying to put Geoghegan under pressure, who was a little bit isolated. See Nizzolo, he is sprinting because he's worried that if he's in Geoghegan's position and someone loses the wheel on the left-hand side in the gutter, then he's going to get on the wrong side of this split. Really smart work from Giacomo Nizzolo for NTT, and Geoghegan luckily was able to move up through the middle of the bunch. You can see his bright yellow jersey. And what you can't see in this zoomed-in horizontal shot is that Stefan Kung on the front for FDJ is trying to chase down Peter Sagan and Schachmann, who have actually split from this group. Schachmann leading GC. Pinot is on Stefan Kung's wheel, but he's going to lose the wheel because there's a right to left crosswind. Kung doesn't realize it yet, and then in about 3 or 4 seconds looks under his shoulder and realizes, oh no, Pinot's been dropped. And I think Kung obviously pulled too hard. That put Pinot into the red. Trek did it more gradually, bringing up Vincenzo Nibali. They didn't panic too much with Alex Kirsch and Mads Pedersen, who'd actually, I think, bridged across to Schachmann and Peter Sagan, and was sitting on, again, Peter Sagan creating the split on his own, according to Schachmann in the post-race interview. Selfless work from him, obviously had absolutely fantastic legs. And then in the group behind, which Pinot and Bardet are now in, they're trying to form an echelon quickly, but you see this Bora-Hansgrohe rider, he pulls through to the middle and then stops pedaling, so he doesn't really pull over the top of the NTT rider, which means that this Pinot group is going to get gapped very quickly by the group ahead with Nibali and Schachmann. Comment down below, do you think Bora-Hansgrohe made a mistake bringing Ackermann back into this first echelon with Schachmann and Sagan, because they brought Sergio Higuita, the main GC threat for Schachmann, into this first echelon with him, as well as Giacomo Nizzolo, who's glued to Ackermann's wheel, perhaps the biggest threat for the stage win if it comes down to a reduced bunch sprint with Ackermann. It's a really difficult call to make. Perhaps they didn't want to be outnumbered by Trek Segafredo with just Sagan and Schachmann in the group. And regardless, the Higuita, Ackermann, Nizzolo, Madwurth, Schmidt group makes it back to the first echelon, and as I said, Higuita performed magically in these crosswinds in Stage 2 Paris-Nice, flicking Pedersen furiously through. He had a few issues in the UAE last week actually in the crosswinds. I'm not sure if that was just bad luck or what happened there. And this is the crazy thing about Paris-Nice. Quintana and Julian Alaphilippe already 1 minute and 20 seconds back. They haven't seen any mountain stages yet, and yet their GC ambitions were over. 3 kilometers now to go. They've got a decent 20-second gap on that Pinot group. Sagan and Bora start to think about stage win. They call for Grossschartner to go to the front here. He's going to go in front of Sagan, and then Schachmann, Ackermann and Sagan are going to try and block through this sharp right-hand corner coming up and lose the wheel of Grossschartner through that corner, trying to put pressure on Trek Segafredo. They've perhaps noticed that Pedersen's at the back of this group and tied. Nizzolo also doesn't have any teammates, so maybe he'll have to chase, and that will weaken his sprint if he's having to do work in the last 3 kilometers, although he moves up pretty smartly on the inside through that corner. And it's really great work from Bora-Hansgrohe. I like this move with Grossschartner here because he's also kind of a GC threat. Grossschartner came 9th in the Vuelta last year in a 1-week stage race. He can be a GC threat, so it's actually Nibali who chases it down on his own. And Nibali was super strong in this finale, chasing down not just this move, but later ones. You can see Pedersen getting dropped here. He'd done so much work for Nibali, creating the bigger gap to the Pinot and Alaphilippe Quintana group. Nibali brings back Grossschartner, 2.5 Ks to go. Schachmann tries to counter, but he's marked, I think, by Nederlands on Israel Startup Nation. Sagan and Ackermann then slot in front of Nizzolo, 4th and 5th wheel. And I wonder if Sagan had been allowed to attack perhaps through that last corner or counter here, whether Sagan would have been strong enough to go solo for this stage win. I personally think he would have, because there was no Pedersen left in this group and he's stronger than the Israel guys, and Nizzolo was isolated. Schachmann then starts to do the lead out and just make sure they keep that 20 to 25 second gap to the Pinot group. He's got Nibali on his wheel, Sagan 3rd wheel, Ackermann 4th wheel, Nizzolo 5th wheel. Nederlands then starts to move up the left-hand side. I think he was trying to bring Pollitt up on the inside, but Pollitt loses his wheel and goes to try and slot onto Nizzolo's wheel, who actually has Sturven on his wheel. Sorry, it's Sturven 5th wheel, not Alex Kirsch, if I've said that previously. Sagan kicks with 300 meters to go. He's going to drop Ackermann off at about 200 meters to go. Ackermann kicks a little bit early, you must say, but he didn't have much of a lead out left and can only sprint for about 7 seconds out of the saddle. Nizzolo comes out of his slipstream, and takes the big win. He had a great season before he crashed last year, Schachmann at solo, as well as winning the European Championships in a hard race, and he was very savvy in this Paris-Nice Stage 2, sensing danger when I think Sturven and Trek were trying to split it, moving up on the inside when Bora-Hansgrohe were trying to let the Grohe shut the wheel go, and allowing Ackermann to slot nicely just in front of him to get the perfect lead out to kick with about 125 metres remaining. And he was too strong for Pollitt and Mads Schmidt, who kind of messed it up actually. I think they would have been better off with Mads Schmidt leading out Niels Pollitt. Sturven getting on the podium, and Agita a very nice sprint as well. He kind of got boxed in, and I think he could have come third, Agita, if he'd had clear air to the line. But what a stage this was. Crosswind action, Bora-Hansgrohe and Trek splitting it up multiple times. That really set the foundation for Max Schachmann taking out the general classification of Paris-Nice last year. He's lining up again this year, Schachmann, but he's got the best one-week stage racer to contend with this year, Primoz Roglic. I can't wait to see how they go. And if you want to see the highlights free to air if you're in the UK, every night you can see them on ITV4, 6 PM for the first night and then 7 PM for the rest. But that's all from me. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like it down below if you did, and we'll see you soon. Ciao.